Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to the next part of my Let's Play for Final Fantasy XIV. This was heavily requested after I did the Healing Your First Dungeon. This is going to be Tanking Your First Dungeon. Now, there's a few things that I want to go over before we get into that. The first thing is, you may notice that my user interface has changed around a little bit. I'm going to make a separate video for messing with your user interface and your HUD, because while there are some simple things you'll probably want to know, there's also a lot of little things that you can do to really personalize it, and that's all I really did here. I moved some things off to the side, which you can do just by going to the HUD and moving it around. I redid my action bars, which we already know how to do. The big thing is I put my party list in the middle of the screen. Not right in the middle, but I like it there so I can see when my party members have status effects, and just in case somebody else is taking damage, so I know what they're taking damage from. It just helps me monitor my party a little bit better as a tank. You also notice I have it on for solo. I like it like that. It's just a personal preference thing. I like to have it enabled for solo play. Now, the one big thing you want to do before you do your first dungeon as a tank is you want to check your gear. Since you're going to be the person taking most of the damage, hopefully, you want to have good gear, decent gear, at least gear that's up to date for your level. The most important being your weapon, in this case as a gladiator, your shield. As a marauder, you wouldn't worry about that, and your left side armor. Your right side armor should be, okay, but it doesn't have to be super great at this level. You'll worry about that at the later levels. So the big thing that I see a lot of newer tanks do is they'll pick up any gear that says Disciple of War, or it says Gladiator, Marauder, Paladin, Warrior, Lancer, and Dragoon, and they'll use it as tank gear, when more specifically you want gear that only works with Gladiators, Marauders, Paladins, and Warriors. You don't want ones that just flat out say Disciple of War, because their defense values are usually a lot lower. They're good for solo leveling, they don't hurt for solo leveling at the very least, but for dedicated tanking you want these pieces that just say the 4 tank class and jobs in the game. The ones that say Lancer and Dragoon, they have higher defense values, but still not as good as actual tank gear. So as you can see, all of my left side gear just says Gladiator, Marauder, Paladin, Warrior. The right side gear is either going to say all classes or Disciple of War. You don't have to look out for that here. These are really just supplementary at this level for more damage, a slightly more vitality. I don't even think you can get vitality accessories at this level. I think you still have to wait like another 5-10 levels, so it doesn't really matter. Just make sure for your first dungeon that your left side is going to be what you have. With that out of the way, I am going to queue into Tam-tara Deepcroft. It's the second dungeon you'll unlock. We did Sastosh as a healer, so I'm going to do Tam-tara Deepcroft as a tank. It's probably going to be instant queue, if I had to guess. If not, pretty close to it. So while we're waiting on the queue and while we're starting at the dungeon, you'll notice, like I said, I move my bars around. Now, because you don't have too many abilities at this level, this bar setup works now. This absolutely will not work later when you have more job abilities, more class abilities, and more cross-class abilities. So with the controller, I have on my R2 trigger, I have my basic combo abilities. On the right-hand side, I have Riot and Savage Blade. Later, I'll be replacing Riot Blade with Rage of Halone in that spot. Probably put Savage Blade there as well. But I've got all of my physical attacks on R2 and the face buttons. Shield Lob being triangles, Fast Blade being circle, X being Riot Blade, and Square being Savage Blade. I'm going to be talking about those two a lot in this dungeon, especially as a Gladiator, because this is a mistake I see Gladiators make much more than I see Marauders make it. On the directional button with R2, I have Rampart, which is a defensive cooldown. Let's queue into that. I have Convalescence, which will increase the healing I receive. I have Flash, which is for AoE tanking. It just pisses off all the enemies so that they'll attack you more. And later on, at a certain point, you'll get a passive that'll even make it inflict a blind effect. And I have Fight or Flight on the left face button, and that is for increasing the damage that you deal, which helps actually not only kill things faster, but it increases the amount of enmity that you generate as a tank, and that is extremely useful at the start of fights when people tend to go crazy with all of their damage. On L2, I have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that is for marking targets so my party knows which order I want them to kill the enemies in. This is very important in low-level dungeons because people sometimes tend to just do their own thing, and as you can see, I just quickly mark them, run in, bam, just start the fight like that. You always want to try and start with Shield Lob instead of just running up to them and swinging your sword for the first time. After I Shield Lob, I'll throw out 2 or 3 flashes, depending on if my party's AoEing, how much damage they're doing, if I need to start generating single target enmity, any of that stuff. So I'm very confident in this party. The healers, somebody's messing with the marks a little bit. Oh, they fixed it. Nice. And it seems like we all had the same idea of leaving the enemy at 1 HP. That'll happen from time to time. It doesn't hurt. It's a little funny, actually, but no big deal. So at the beginning of every pull, I'm going to try and quickly mark everything. Newer players, you'd probably take your time and mark them. And honestly, I need to try and, I really need to focus when I'm marking, because I made this mistake earlier. I was, just testing out all my binds and everything. And I actually ended up using sprint because it's on the directional button. Something I'm still getting used to with the controller is doing commands without R2 or L2 press and then switching over and doing them with the button press. It's just something because I'm so used to being a keyboard player that it's something I just got to get used to. So I'm not really using too many defensive or offensive cooldowns going into this dungeon. I'm just basically Savage Blading. I'll run in, Shield Lob, double flash, then I'll spam Savage Blade on my single target. If I notice that my party's AoEing or that people aren't attacking my target, I'll switch over and occasionally Savage Blade one of the other ones. But for the most part, that's all you got to do. Now, one thing that as a tank you'll notice a lot in dungeons are enemies that wander around. This is one of those enemies that just basically wanders around. You can pull those on their own, and it really helps to just isolate the enemies and reduce the damage that you take, because then your healers can help DPS, and it helps a lot. I'm actually going to start marking the next pull while we're killing this. So there you go. Shield Lob, flash once, flash twice, and begin my single target combo. Now you'll notice that I'm using Savage Blade. As you can see now, I can see that I saw somebody AoE there, so I know that one guy used one of his AoE abilities. So like I said, you'll notice I'm using Savage Blade a lot. I'm not really using Riot Blade for anything, despite the fact that Riot Blade actually does more damage than Savage Blade. Now, I went over this in the last part when I spoke about healing, looking at your abilities before you actually, and understanding the way that they work in a party-oriented scenario. And Savage Blade, while it does less damage, it generates more Enmity, which is the stat that makes enemies go after you when you attack them. The more Enmity you generate with an attack, the better it generally is for tanking. Yeah, as you can see, trying to get up, somebody else pulled. Not too big of a deal. 2 flashes, and we're good to go. So Savage Blade is really good when you're trying to hold Enmity on a single target. As you can see, I already managed to pull aggro on both the enemies here, so now I'm just focusing down with Savage Blade. I noticed that one's about to die, so I'm just going to switch over to the new one, do Savage Blade right there, and just keep going and going and going. For the low levels, you're pretty much just going to be spamming, for the most part, 2 buttons. The pull is more exciting than basically everything else that you're going to be doing as a low-level tank. Occasionally you have to dodge an ability, and that'll get you excited a little bit. But this, it's not too stressful, so don't worry too much about it. Again, looks like might have pulled a little early, but again, not too big a deal. Just hit them both with flash, and we're good to go. Now, the reason you really want to try and pull with Shield Lob, I've seen, some people say, oh, well, if I start with Fast Blade, I can get to Savage Blade quicker, and it'll be more Enmity overall. But like I said, people like to front load the amount of damage that they do. They start with a bunch of cooldowns, they start with their highest hitting abilities, and if you start with a Fast Blade, the enemies will leave you and go attack the rest of your party, because that is the most common way to start. Sometimes groups will, give the tank a second or two to pull aggro, especially if he's less geared than them. That's very common. But for the most part, you just want to start with that Shield Lob on your marked target, just for the sake of making sure that doesn't happen. Now, let me see if... Yes. I'm actually going to... I messed up a little bit. It's alright. Even if you mess up a little bit in these low-level ones, it usually won't bite you in any way. That was me messing up with my controller more than it was just me messing up. As you can see, like I said, this is the result of me messing up that pull, is the healers pulling a lot of aggro. As you can see, they're curing a lot. That's something that I went over in the other video, when is curing too much and when is curing too little. That's a big point that I went over. And that's another reason why you kind of want to start with Shield Lobs and flashes, just in case something like that happens, You never know when your healer is going to, heal a lot or overheal a lot. It's just safer to do things like that, One enemy on his own, I don't need to mark him. My party will figure out that this is the guy that we're going to be killing. And other than that, it's just really basic in terms of the abilities that you'll be using. On bigger pulls with 3 or more enemies is usually when I'll save abilities like Rampart and Convalescence, because I'll be taking a lot more damage in those situations. I'm actually going to save it up here despite there being 3 enemies, only because after I kill these 3 enemies, I know there's going to be a boss that spawns, or a mini boss, I should say. So I'm just going to pull with that, move in to cast Flash. Now, luckily, as a tank, your global cooldown is very long, and it very rarely gets shorter unless you have a Scholar using one of their buffs, but at this level, that's not really an issue. So as you can see, the guy is AoEing, which isn't bad. It's actually very TP efficient to be AoEing if you have a certain number of enemies. So nothing, he's actually, you know, doing the right thing, kind of, but you have to keep that in mind as a tank. That Shield Lob, 2 Flash, and single target opener, that won't work if your party members are AoEing, because you have to make sure that you don't lose aggro on all the enemies. Now, this is the boss, this is the mini boss. I started with my fight or flight just to make sure I could do some extra damage to him. You should be using that while you're pulling also. You don't have to reserve cooldown strictly for bosses. Big trash pulls, really hard hitting enemies, even if they're not bosses, it's really good to use on. However, having them up for bosses is definitely going to help. And in later endgame scenarios, you'll pretty much only be fighting bosses at certain points anyway. Now, one other thing that I want to mention, as I was saying, you got to make sure that you're keeping aggro on all of the enemies that are spawning and that you're fighting. And if you look all the way on the left hand side, you'll see, you know, like a blinking red square. It says the letter R. It says Void Soul Counter, which is the name of the enemy we're fighting, and it has a little bar that's depleting. So we're gonna go over that. That is actually your Enmity list. That lists every enemy that has some sort of that you've attacked in any way, shape, or form. And the blinking, nice, a plundered cuirass. That'll be a nice upgrade. I'll take that with glee as soon as everyone passes it, which in dungeons, you never know. Sometimes people take forever to pass things. So I'm just going to pull. I'm not going to wait for it to fall into... Oh, okay, never mind. We'll just fight these two. Now I have it in my party. It's not too big a deal. He'll come back eventually. Don't worry. So, where was I going? So the Enmity list on the left-hand side, you'll notice I have 2 blinking squares. I got both these enemies that we're fighting and their HP below them. That is a pretty good way to indicate how successfully you're tanking groups of enemies. Now, when you see those blinking squares, that's how you know that an enemy is going after you, that you are doing your successful job as a tank. It's also a good way of knowing if you're a DPS, if an enemy is attacking you and the tank needs to pull them off you. Some enemies, tanks can't do anything about. They'll go after people regardless of any abilities that they use. But for the most part, in these low-level dungeons, it's a good indicator of, do I have aggro on all the enemies that my party is fighting? I see we're fighting 1 enemy. That Enmity list has only 1 enemy, so I know I'm doing my job. If there's 3, I know we're fighting 3 and no more than that, or all 3 of them blinking red squares for me, then good, I'm doing my job. And you want to keep track of that. That is something that you absolutely want to keep track of. This is going to be a pretty big pull. Oh, you know what? Even better. Oh, never mind. Even worse. So my party just decided to pull for me. So situations like that will happen in some dungeons. It can happen because somebody ran too far forward, and because this is 4 enemies, I am actually going to use Flash a little bit more. I see some AoEs going off, so I want to make sure that I can hold aggro on them. I also use Rampart because I'm going to be taking a lot of damage here, so it's going to be more effective for me to do that. As you can see with all these AoEs going off. Now, here's a situation as a tank where you're gonna see me using Riot Blade instead of Savage Blade. And I know I said Savage Blade was better for single target enemy. Why would I use Riot Blade? Well, Riot Blade restores your MP when you use it as a gladiator, and because I'm tanking all these enemies, I'm spamming Flash a lot because of all the AoEs that are going on. And Flash is holding pretty good enmity, but I'm running out of MP. I need to make sure I have enough. So I'm using Riot Blade now because I can see on the left-hand side, both are blinking, so I'm holding aggro just fine. I need the MP if I want to AoE tank them a little bit better. And now that there's only 1 left, I don't need that anymore. However, I do want to pull another pack of enemies, so I'm actually going to get my MP to fall off Riot Blade right here. It's basically good if you know you're going to need MP for something, either mid-pull or after the pull. I'm also going to go over here. You may not see this very often. Some groups just completely ignore this room over here, and that's very common, as you saw in Tastasha in low-level dungeons, to have tanks that ignore side rooms and treasure chests and things like that. They just want to level. They just want to get to the next point. And it's not a bad way to play. In fact, most of the time it ends up being more experience points. But I want to show you guys pretty much the entire dungeon. We see all we got was ethers out of that, and you know how I feel about using consumables and ethers, even though I have 40 potions on my hotbar, just in case I need them. So yeah, what we took from that is Enmity list, check it. Am I AoEing a lot? Use flash a lot. Is everybody AoEing a lot? I guess I should say more specifically. If your entire party is AoEing, you can't just start going through your single target rotation until you're sure that everything is going to be safely on you. And that's something that comes with experience and after doing dungeons a certain number of times. And I am confident that you'll get there eventually at some point. I'm not sure if the music is working on this recording. If it isn't, I apologize. It doesn't actually seem like... Oh, no, it is. Okay. I can't actually hear the music right now, which is why I'm wondering about that. So sorry if that seems a little bit weird to you. 3 enemies. I'm actually going to flash 3 times since it'll probably be a while before I get to that 3rd enemy. Now, like I said, one thing you can always do, just tab over, hit one with an ability just to generate some extra enmity on it, and you'll be good to go. So I spoke about the enmity list on the left-hand side, something that new tanks definitely need to be accustomed to, and it's going to take some getting used to. You move it someplace where you could see it very easily. But there's another way of checking enmity on the target that you're currently fighting. It might be a little bit hard to see, but if you look very closely under each person's, not their name, but the plate that designates what class or job they're playing, in the party list, you'll see what looks like a little bar that goes up and down for each of the individual party members. That is the bar that tracks the how much aggro or enmity everybody has on the enemy. If it's full, then you'll see a little letter A. I should probably blow that up so that you guys can see it, or show you guys really quickly after the dungeon. I'm gonna quickly see. Nice. I'm gonna need those because they're, you know, I'm able to need on them, so probably tank gear, which is really good. I didn't even equip the Curus yet, but no big deal. And yeah, I am getting lost in my own... Yeah, well, we're going to do it exactly what I said not to. We're going to start with Flash, because I lost myself in my buttons. Another... Oh, somebody... I marked the friggin' cultist orb as 1. Alright, I'm actually going to use Rampart here, because I messed up pretty bad. So, yeah. Nobody's gonna give a crap what I have, what order I tell them to kill anything in because of that start. That was a bad start. It happens, you know, especially as someone who doesn't really use a controller all that often. This is the only series. As soon as I'm done with this series, I go back to using a keyboard and mouse. And I'm just like, oh, thank God, I don't have to do that anymore. Although I gotta say, it's not bad. It really isn't. It's just not. It's just after so much time of using the other one, getting used to using this one is a different experience altogether. And it's an experience that I'm glad I can share with you guys. So we have another mini boss right here, another void soul counter, not a big deal. So you can see kind of on the party list, after I dodge this next AoE, I think I'm gonna blow up my party list. I guess that'll be a mini like UI guide right there in the middle of the video, how to enlarge and shrink the different aspects of your user interface. Good, after he does this AoE, I'm gonna do that. So here we go. HUD layout. I think it's R3 with a controller. Yeah, it's R3. I'm just gonna blow it up one more size. Not a big deal. So if you're using a controller, you can change the size of your user interface things. I believe this only works. I don't know if this works on the PS3. I know it works on the PS4 and the PC. You can use R3 to increase the size of any HUD element that you have selected currently, whether it be in the HUD layout or you're in your actions and traits menu or your character menu, wherever. You can pretty much enlarge anything. If you enlarge it to a certain size, I think it goes all the way up to 140% of its maximum size. Hey, knives. In case I ever decide I want a level rogue on this character, which I probably will, actually, so that's pretty good to have. I'm actually going to go out of my way, equip some of this. Yes, that's all tank gear. Good. Perfect. And I won the knives. Unfortunately, I am a loot whore in this video. One cannot deny. One cannot deny. Loot whoring meaning that I'm just rolling on everything. I mean, before I was trying to roll on things that I strictly needed, but I realized I'm going to be leveling a lot of different classes on this character. It's not strictly going to be a healer as much as I want it to be, which is good. Okay, so it's a good thing I tabbed over, because even though I did my standard 2-flash opener right there, the healer actually pulled aggro at some point on this Yarzon feeder, and I tabbed over to it real quick just in time to see that it was about to lose aggro using the enmity list under my party, which was the whole reason that I blew up the size of my party list in the first place, was so that those bars under everybody's name would be easier to see. I'm just going to pull this guy back. Pull him back real quick. Let's just hit him with one shield lob, and that should be good. A little bit crammed in here, but we should be okay. So yeah, you can see that bar under it a little bit better. You can see that because I am the enemy, I am the main target that this enemy is going after, that I am that it has an A next to the name. Second place is the archer, who it says 2, and you know, etc, etc. It goes all the way to 8, so don't worry too much. Healers overhealing like a lot. Okay, now they're not overhealing a lot. I'm actually, because there's a lot of overhealing going on, like a lot of overhealing, I'm not even losing HP and I'm getting heals. It's just spam healing. I'm gonna start with 3 flashes from now on. They weren't doing. I don't think they were doing that at the start of the dungeon, but I spoke about that in my healer video. Why you kind of want to avoid doing that. You know, waste of MP, generates a lot of extra enmity too, which can be. It could be. There are healers out there that purposely do it to grief. This guy's not purposely doing it to grief. I know he's not. He's just doing his job. You know, he's a healer. He's making sure that I stay alive. Nothing wrong with that. I just have to adjust. It's better to try and adjust in the Duty Finder for the way that the other players play than to just expect everyone to play perfectly or to play exactly like, you know, you're supposed to or you expect them to do it. Instead of taking the time to go out of your way and complain about, oh, they're a bad player or something like that, which this guy's not, because now look, he's doing it perfectly now. That was the perfect amount of HP to let me lose before he started healing, and now he's not doing it as much anymore. It's not worth it to go out of your way to do that. Just play around it, and if it gets to the point where it's so bad that you guys can't even complete the duty, just keep your temper in check, you know? I know it's easy to get a temper, it's over the internet, it's mostly anonymous, you know, so most of the time you don't have to worry about it, but you just don't get yourself worked up over it, you know, is all I'm trying to say. Just let it be what it is and work with it. You can work with anything. That's the thing. You can work with pretty much anything in this game. The dungeons aren't super hard, so you just gotta be able to work around it, and you'll be okay. Don't worry. I have faith in you. This is going to be annoying, on the other hand. So this is something that, as a tank, you are going to run into occasionally. Normally, there's a way to handle this. I'm going to do it the ghetto way, where... Here, actually, you know what? I am going to do it this way. I'm going to pull it behind a wall to try and get him closer. See? If you do that, if you break the line of sight of an enemy, then they have to run after you in order to attack you, because I'm behind a wall. He can't cast on me from behind a wall for the most part. So by running that enemy behind the wall, I managed to help him close the gap. You can also pull the enemies back really far and then run up to the other enemy. There's a lot of little different tricks you have to learn as a new tank. And the healer pulled aggro, but don't worry, I'll be pulling it back any second right now. There we go. Spirit bonds are completing, going through, just pressing 2 buttons, the way that we all do it. I'm actually going to Riot Blade a couple times, because I used a little bit more MP. I don't even think I'll be able to get a second Riot Blade off. Nope. And we're going to mark both of these. The marking is something that I really had to get used to on the controller. So often I was just hitting sprint, and that's not good. I already spoke about why you shouldn't sprint as a tank while you're about to fight something, unless there's like some sort of very specific strategy that calls for it. And yet I was doing it, and I was like, oh, I just got to get used to not pressing all the way over there. And I'd say I've gotten a little bit better at it. Gotten a little bit better at using the controller with this. And I'm taking a lot less damage now. Like, I mean, the thunders, it's really hard to tell, because my defense didn't go up a whole lot. But, I mean, I picked up a fair amount of gear. Look at all this left side gear I have. I got 4 dungeon grade pieces, 2 ethereal, and 2, like, full-on dungeon grade. And then I've just got, you know, up-to-date belt, head, and the other thing. Sometimes you can get accessories from these dungeons too, and those are really, really good, because those will usually last you a lot longer than the gear will. The gear will usually get replaced in a dungeon or two, you know, a few levels usually. Okay, so I ran out of MP, so I'm actually gonna flash real quick, and then I'm gonna Riot Blade, start getting some MP back. I'm actually gonna probably spam Riot Blade here just so I can get MP back before my next pull. As long as I don't lose aggro, I should be fine. And I'm watching my aggro list to see if I need to use Savage Blade to make sure that, like, the healer doesn't pull aggro or the archers don't pull aggro. It's all about just being aware of your surroundings and what your party is really doing. So, yeah, I was able, even though Riot Blade doesn't generate as much enmity, does a little more damage, doesn't generate as much enmity, I was able to use it a lot there just to get my MP back. And I got my MP back specifically so I could do this next pull and have enough MP for a few flashes. So there's a lot of wandering enemies right here, so I'm just gonna run up into them and just flash and get aggro on all of them. I'm gonna use it a few times. I'm also gonna use Rampart here. I actually should have probably saved it for the next pull, but I've got enough gear at this point where I probably don't need to. I'm getting a lot of healing here, so I am gonna use a lot more flashes. So you're gonna see me using Riot Blade. Not bad. Just making sure that I don't lose aggro to all these things. Flash was buffed in a couple patches ago, so it's a lot better, especially at these low levels for new tanks. The buff definitely helped a lot for that. So it's not as bad as it used to be for low-level gladiators, but around level 30, if you're a gladiator and you've played a marauder, or you're playing marauder after leveling gladiator, level 30 to 40 is way easier on a warrior than it is on a paladin, which is, level 30 is when you'll be unlocking your new jobs. There's just getting Defiance at 30. Yeah, you're a little squishier than you'd like to be, but at least you've got the extra health and the extra healing. But not having shield off at 30 really, really sucks by comparison. Especially if you're an experienced tank on one and you're just trying the other out. Ugh, it can be a disaster. This is a big pull for enemies. This is the kind of pull where you'd pretty much want to, where you'd want to have your cooldowns available. I'm expecting to get a lot of overhealing done here, and I missed that varlet with like 5 flashes. Also, there's some AoEing going on, so I'm just gonna flash until my MP is out, try to get a little bit more damage out with a Riot Blade. I'm gonna have Rampart up again soon. The next pull is also really big though, but this pull hurts a little bit more in my opinion, so I'm gonna go ahead and pop Rampart as well. Convalescence had just about worn off by the time I had used that, so it ended up coming at a pretty good time. So, one thing I like to do as a tank is I like to take out casters first because they annoy the hell out of me. And so that is exactly what I did. I marked the 2 casters first. And that was probably something I should have touched on earlier, is how I decided what order we were going to kill. Most of the time, it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter in these super low-level dungeons. That's something that's more important later on than it is now. And that's something, again, that'll come with experience with individual fights as a tank. That's not something you should be expected to know in... that you should go for the casters first in Tam-tara, Deepcroft. You should have watched the guide first. No. This is level 15 stuff. Like, at level 16, I guess, because these enemies are 16. You don't need to know every little in and out of every little thing. You just need to know how to get it done. And that's what we're doing right now. We're getting it done. So that was a big pull. We're going to touch the cultist orbs. That's another thing. I should have probably touched on that as well. I hid my duty list. I actually have a bunch of quests, and you can actually see the current objective for your dungeon on the duty list. You saw that in the last part, no doubt. But I hid it just because it was kind of just in my way. Oh, okay, well, that happens in this dungeon. That's actually not uncommon. That happens a lot in this dungeon, just because usually being close enough to the gate that you just saw me open is also close enough to, what am I trying to say? Is usually close enough to aggro these things. So, I'm not going to go out of my way and really mark all these. I'm just going to keep AoEing in this case. Just because I don't want to take the time, in between my global cooldowns to just go ahead and mark everything. They're killing everything. I'm not losing aggro. It doesn't really matter. Just spamming Riot Blade. Pretty much that's it. I'm just spamming Riot Blade. Riot Blade and Flash. Well, not Riot Blade and Flash. You got to combo into it first, but you know what I mean. Come on, guys. Come on. I can't target this guy. There we go. I'm going to pop Fight or Flight. Make sure I can pull aggro pretty adequately here at the start of the fight. Now, this guy, I got to admit, he hits pretty hard. He uses an ability called End Thunder, which makes all of his auto attacks deal extra lightning damage. And you can see his auto attacks. I just dodged 2 of them, which I'm very thankful for. I just dodged 3 of them, which I'm very thankful for. Dark Orb, I just dodged 4 auto attacks. This is a terrible example of what I'm trying to show. Can you land an auto attack for once? See, it did 67 with the auto attack and an extra 26, so he's hit me for like 90. Like, that's a lot at this level, considering that a level 15 person coming in here might only have like 400 HP, maybe like 420. Just Blaze? Just kidding. It's a lot of damage. So having defensive cooldowns for this guy, for these soul counters, definitely helps. And just for bosses and mini bosses in general, you don't want to stack all your defensive cooldowns at once. You kind of want to spread them out, but you want to make sure you're not just being like, oh, this isn't a big boss. I'm not going to use any of my cooldowns at all now. He's about to die, so I'm not going to use my cooldowns right now. You don't want to literally just be like, no, I'm only going to use them on big bosses, And that's not a Metal Gear Solid joke. you gotta just be ready to use them on pulls where you know big damage. And if you don't know big damage coming, you see there's a lot of enemies, just assume it's big damage, you know? It didn't happen in Sastasha. You guys saw the one dungeon. Warded round shield. I'm pretty sure I have that already, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass. And well, I wouldn't have been able to roll on it anyway. Gonna wait for the archer. I see that he's viewing a cutscene right now, so I'm not gonna pull. That's a big thing as a tank. Make sure the people in your party that they're all there before you actually pull the boss. If you see somebody watching a cutscene, don't just pull the boss. Don't just pull it. Let him enjoy it. Let him watch the cutscene. You know. So I'm going to pull this boss same way. This guy casts a lot, so I have to run up to him even with the shield lob. Regardless, you should be doing that. So this boss is, I don't really need to talk. We're just going to kill a bunch of adds. Eventually, whenever an imp spawns, you have to kill the imp or the boss won't take any damage. So you're going to see in a second here, like a tether. Oh, that means we got to kill the inconspicuous imp, or we can't damage the boss anymore. So one thing that you may want to do if your party doesn't know that is mark it. If you know an enemy has to die before you continue fighting the boss, you should probably mark them. I'm a little worried about pulling aggro here if the healer does too much over-healing. But no, he's doing alright. He's only healing. It seems he's only healing when necessary at this point. He actually hit me pretty hard with that water there. That was a pretty good one. Wasn't too much overhealing on that one. I'm really, because this character is supposed to be a healer, I'm really watching the overhealing. And as a tank, that's something you should be able to do anyway. So you can see a bunch of enemies here. This can get a little bit hectic trying to grab aggro. You actually don't need to get aggro on these inconspicuous imps, really. You could just leave these strictly to the DPS. But I just like to run up and hit them just for the sake of doing damage to them. Yeah, I don't need to tank them, but did he just use the limit break? He just used the healing limit break. Well, I guess granted we didn't have a DPS limit break, so it's not really that big an issue. Yeah, archers, by the way, as of right now, do not have a DPS limit break. They will have one, or they will have a limit break that's not a healer limit break in the expansion. But as of right now, they have a healing limit break. So we didn't have a damage limit break. It was going to be a healing or tank limit break anyway. Tank limit break is something that you'll really only use in very specific situations. You can use it as a defensive cooldown if all you have is healing limit breaks otherwise. But in dungeons, most of the time, you'll end up just letting the DPS use it. It helps kill bosses faster. Most groups will just save it for the final boss. You can use it like on the first boss and get it back for the second boss if you get it by the first boss. It's just not guaranteed for you to get it by the first boss. I'm actually gonna just keep flashing them. I'm gonna run over to this imp and start beating the crap out of him. Oh yeah. Got a lot of enemies on me, so I'm going to use a defensive cooldown. Not going to use convalescence. I'm going to stick with Rampart. I'm receiving a lot of healing as it is anyway. Oh, why did I shield lob? Why did I shield lob? Why did I do that? No. Everyone's going to say mean things about me in the comment section now. Guys, say mean things. Say mean things. Say them. And that's it. Now we just kill the boss. And it's over. Pretty easy fight. Alright. Well, I spoke about enmity lists. I spoke about using your enmity generating with Marauders. The difference, instead of Riot Blade, it could potentially be Maim. Maim is a good thing to have up as a Marauder, but not until you have aggro on everything. Like, make sure you're not going to lose aggro on something when you go out of your way to maim it. Start with an enmity generating combo, switch to Maim. It's pretty much the same thing for here. Riot Blade is my non-enmity generating combo. Excuse me, I keep hiccuping. Silent hiccuping, though. Acolyte's thigh boots, I need those for my healer, but I'm probably not going to win them. Oh, I did win them. Nice. I like this guy's name. Give it to DPS for once. Hey, challenge log's almost complete. We're going to leave the duty and be done. Let that guy enjoy his cutscene in peace. So I went over the enmity list. I went over your enmity generating combo and reading your abilities and your non-enmity generating combo. For Gladiator, it's Flash for AoE tanking. For Marauder, it'll be Overpower, which is TP instead of MP, so be careful. Keep in mind, Flash is cross-class, so as a Marauder, you can get Flash, and it does help. Since it was buffed, it is okay to use as a Marauder in the lower levels, just so you can save TP for more consecutive pulls. Went over the user interface changes real quick, both enmity lists. Yeah, I don't have too much to talk about. I guess the only few things I can really offer as additional advice before ending this video is make sure you dodge out of AoEs. You know, just because you're a tank and you're supposed to be tanking damage doesn't mean you're supposed to get hit by those AoEs. Most enemies will have markers that'll tell you where the AoE is happening, but not all of them. So that'll, again, come with learning experience and come with learning fights. But make an effort to move out of AoEs and then move back to where you were standing You know, don't just stay where you moved. Move back to where you were standing. You saw me doing it. If you rewind the video, go back to watching me fight the soul counters. You saw me doing that. I would move out of it and then move right back into position. That way it doesn't disorient the party or anything. The boss doesn't move that much. Everybody's DPSing okay. It's just little things like that that you want to know as a tank. And I'm sure I missed a few things. And we're definitely going to have to revisit tanking in the mid-30s because it changes a lot by then. As does healing, as does DPSing. It's all going to change a lot by the time we get to our job, we get our job abilities. And don't worry, because I am going to make videos for that. So, anyway, guys, thanks for watching the video. I'm glad that you guys have been enjoying the series thus far. I will see you guys in the next part, which will probably, if it's not going to be, it's either going to be me playing a DPS in Copperbell Mines, which is the next dungeon, since I want to talk about DPSing as well, or it'll be something else like crafting or gathering. I haven't really decided yet. I just kind of wing these whenever I log on. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching the video. I'll see you guys in the next part, and until then, take care.